Boom. I think we're live.
Again.
We're live. That boom was the last firework. That's what that was. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to... I think we're still working on a name. We recently had a discussion of the name, but welcome to what is still currently referred to as the CASA Advocacy Update live stream podcast internet thing. We're going to shorten that down, though, I promise. But welcome. Welcome back, everyone. We'll do some quick hey, how are yous? I'd like to hear how everyone's 4th of July went. I hope everybody in chat, if you're here in the States and you celebrate the 4th of July, how it was for you. So, Kristin, hey, how are you?
Oh, sure. I'm wiping my nose and you get.
Oh, yeah. Alex, hey, how are you? I don't know. Do you want to
okay.
put you in the queue?
I was gone for a few days, as you may have noticed. Folks may have seen that the CASA account was a little quiet for a few days. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. My husband's family have a place out by the Wolf River in Hollister, Wisconsin. And it's an old railroad track lodge. So it has like 7 bedrooms or something like that. And it's really super cool. And the railroad tracks aren't even there anymore. It's now like a snowmobile and biking and walking trail instead. And yeah, they have about an acre. And years ago, we used to all get out there. They'd be up to like 60, 70 people and all the grandkids and everything. And he hasn't done it in several years. And he decided to do it again this year. I should say my in-laws. And so we had I posted some pictures on my Facebook. We had a good, I would say 50 people there, I would say. There was 2 big RVs and 7 tents. We all kind of camped out in his acre yard, and it was a lot of fun. Horseshoes, tubing down the river, sitting around the fire, singing, drinking way too much. But yeah, it was a good time. It was a good time. And we lost Logan. Where did he go?
Yeah, there he ran off.
Did I bore you?
Sorry, my kid's alarm clock just started blasting Guns N' Roses. Now it's like, no, we can't have that. I don't know if anybody heard it or not, but anyways.
Yeah. But anyway, it was a good time. My family's really cool because it's sort of a little microcosm of the American melting pot. We have just about every ethnicity and background, German, Polish, Irish, Scottish, English, Welsh, African American, Puerto Rican, Greek, Italian. I'm trying to think what else we had. And then my nephew, he came up.
It's just like America.
It really is. And he came up from he came up this year too for the first time for the big thing. And his fiance is Venezuelan, so we ended up with a South American. We're gonna have a South American family ties in there too. I think the only thing we're missing is someone from Asia. We just need that, and we'll have pretty much everything covered, I think. But it's great. Well, it's really great. They're just a bunch of really great people. Really great people.
I'm glad that you had a good week, a good last week, and a good weekend, Alex.
Yeah,
sorry, that was a long pause.
That's fine. We went to a parade. That's the first holiday parade I think I've been to probably since I was a kid.
Same. I haven't been to a parade ever.
Plattsburgh has their annual 4th of July parade. So, fire trucks and locally made floats and stuff. It was a lot of fun. And then we, stayed around with our dog to make sure that he was cool with fireworks. So that was a lot of sort of consoling.
How'd he do?
I think he was good. I mean, it's kind of like you. It's everybody around you is sort of setting off their having their own amateur fireworks displays, and that sort of when noises aren't predictable, that's what sort of startles him. So, but he was good. We sort of pet him to sleep on the couch, and everything was fine. So,
right on. Well,
it was a good weekend.
Yeah, we didn't do much here.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, your husband what did he buy?
No, I was just saying my husband bought several $100s worth of real fireworks to put off because we're out in the middle of nowhere, so we could actually do real fireworks. And we had all 3 dogs with us, and so what we ended up doing is we started my car, put the air conditioner on, and cranked the music up and put them in the car because we were staying in a tent. What would we do, right? You can't put them in the tent. That's not going to help anything. But they seemed fine with that. They're like just chilling in the nice air conditioning. They seemed okay. So sorry. How was your 4th weekend, Logan?
Well, I'm glad everybody's dogs were good. My cats just hid under the bed. They were like, nope, we're not dealing with any of what's happening outside, and they just hid. But our 4th was I don't know, pretty boring here, other than like Alex said, we were talking before the show, all of my neighbors, like 5 different houses right around me, all were like, yeah, we're absolutely setting off fireworks this year. And so we just sat out back, had a fire, and watched everybody else's fireworks. Monday, the day after, had a big cookout, had a bunch of people over here, fed a bunch of people, and it was a good day. And lots of whiskey smashes. I don't know if there's any whiskey fans out there, but Nick Green's wife, Casey Pickle, Casey Green. I'm sure a lot of people here know who Casey is, but she does a bunch of cocktails. She has like a site and stuff. So I messaged her and I was like, what's a good like summery whiskey drink? Whiskey smash. And that's what I drank all weekend. It was fantastic. But anyways, that was my weekend for the 4th. What do you guys say? Are we ready to get into some legislation?
Yeah.
All right, we don't have a fancy bumper yet. We're still working on it, but there we go. Legislative rundown. The floor is yours, Alex. What do we got going on this week?
So we will start off in nothing new except for the second thing here. We'll start off in Arizona, where we were last week, I believe. What I've been calling the sensible licensing bill, or sensible licensing regulations, HB 2682, is still in need of support. So if you live in Arizona, please take this opportunity to contact your lawmakers. I sent out an email to a couple specific districts, and I don't remember names off the top of my head here, but there are definitely a few people that are sort of on the fence about this bill and could use some more contact from people who support sort of uniform regulations across the state, and making it so that anti-tobacco activists can't create this patchwork of confusing laws and make it difficult for people to access safer alternatives to smoking. So this is a decent bill, barring Arizona's existing penalties for youth possession and use. But baby steps. So if you're in Arizona, please take a moment, visit our call to action, and send your email, customize your email, let them know your story and why saving access to vapor products is important to you. And just remember, what's at stake here. I mean, this isn't just a regulation bill. This is about making sure that flavors are allowed to be sold as widely as possible in the state of Arizona. So certainly worth supporting. And I'm not really sure. I mean, I'm saying this now because I haven't really sought out an update as of prior to the holiday. But going into the holiday, and I think maybe it was earlier this week, I got word that there were some people who were on the fence that really needed some extra contact. So that's Arizona. The other thing that we put up this week, I believe, or was it last week? It was last week.
Might have been last week.
Yeah, it was last week. Everything's blending together.
But we updated it.
Right, we skipped a week, so it's like all of 2020, how it kind of happened, but it didn't.
Yeah. So Utah, if you are in Utah, what's happening there is this is the result of a bill that was passed, I think, 2018 or 2019. It might have even been sooner. This is something that I apologize, I sort of lost track of. But as per the legislation, the Utah Department of Health is required to basically promulgate regulations regarding nicotine limits. I think some other packaging stuff, some pretty standard stuff, but it's the nicotine limits that are sort of at issue here. And I heard that there may be sort of some shenanigans going on. If anybody follows Greg Conley on Twitter, he reached out to a lawmaker there in Utah, who this lawmaker had been under the impression that they had, through the course of conversations and negotiations, kind of landed on a 5% nicotine cap or 59 milligrams per milliliter. still not something we're supportive of. But now the the State Department of Health is coming back with an amendment to their regulations, and they are proposing a cap on closed system products at 36 milligrams per milliliter. I took some time to kind of, get into why CASA feels this is not appropriate. So I'm not going to read this chapter and verse to people here, but would encourage, this will be part of a larger kind of more formal position statement from CASA about nicotine caps in the future. But providing a lot of information here for people. There's talking points that you can use to sort of develop your comments if you like. I probably should have noted from the top. The Utah Department of Health is accepting comments until July 15th. So that is next Thursday, I believe. And there was a hearing this week on the 7th. I did not attend. It didn't sound great from what I had sort of heard from other people. Yeah, so comments on the proposed rule. Another kind of update that again, this is a regulation. This whole process is something that I lost track of, so I apologize for not having the best details here. But I did get a note from somebody in Utah, and prior to this amendment, apparently the limit is 24 milligrams per milliliter. I don't want to put that out there as like I totally know that that's true, but that was a note that I got. So from the I guess the e-liquid bottle open system side of the industry, this is a step in the right direction for those products. That there will no longer be a cap on e-liquid that you buy in bottles. And it's if shops are selling 36 milligrams in bottles, that's great. It's great for people who adopt open system products. But for the folks who are smoking a pack or two a day, and their only exposure to vapor products is in convenience stores, or even looking for a small compact device that they find in a vape shop, 36 milligrams isn't necessarily going to be the best thing for them. And so people who used to smoke a lot, like me, would really benefit from having a 59 milligram pre-filled pod type system. Utah is sort of pointing, like everybody else, is sort of pointing the finger at one particular manufacturer who has high nicotine content in their closed system products. Worth noting, they're not the only manufacturer that does that, and certainly open system products have been sold with very high concentrations of nicotine salts even after August 8th of 2019. So everybody's kind of got a little bit of dirt on their hands here, and I don't think anybody gets to claim the high ground. Of course, there's no need in pointing out high ground or low ground here, because we know that having the range of nicotine concentrations is ultimately beneficial for people who smoke to discover that these products can replace their cigarettes and move them away from combustion. So CASA's position is, and always has been, we want this variety of products on the market so that more people have more opportunities to find more alternatives that are going to work better for them. And so, again, if you are in Utah, get your comment fingers warmed up and type yourself a comment and send it off to the Utah Department of Health. All of that information on submitting your comments and talking points and all of the things are available on our call to action. Yeah, that's that. That ends the legislative. It's a short and sweet legislative rundown this week. I'm hesitant to sort of describe July and August as sort of the doldrums of summer, but I cross my fingers every year that we'll get a bit of a breather before things start picking back up in the fall. So.
Right on. Well done to you during all that. Arizona and Utah. Definitely get those comments in, guys. Arizona and Utah, if you're out there. We make it pretty easy here to get those done. And Alex has a whole bunch of information that he's got in there for everybody. So, yeah, that was a really fast legislative rundown. Yeah. I was like waiting for a little bit more. And I was like,
at least there's nothing else. I was afraid he'd be like, oh yeah, and by the way, like made and stuff like that. But those are all still kind of ongoing. Yeah, if you want to know what's going on in your state, if we didn't mention anything today, go to the website. I'm going to show them Alex.
Yeah.
Go to the clicky map. Pull up your site. Just go to show them where it's under, how to get there.
Oh, it's under Get Involved.
Under Get Involved.
State
and local. Click on your state. Why don't you pick a state for them?
I'll just go to sad New York.
Oh, man.
And there you can see, as there would be call to actions there if there were call to actions. And there's all your laws and your taxes. I'm in the process of updating that right now.
I did, by the way, since we are on this particular section, I think I passed this along to you, Kristin, at one point, but we did have someone reach out to us asking for more details on certain policies. And this was I don't know if this was a law student or someone working for a law firm or maybe somebody doing compliance work. But they were, out of all the resources that they had looked for, they saw that CASAS was one of the most comprehensive in terms of figuring out state and local laws and so on. So a tremendous resource that you have put together here, Kristin. And so thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kristin. Thank you.
Yeah, and along that note, as if we're giving kudos to the website too, we just got the American Council on Science and Health just did an article on vaping.
Oh, she froze.
And they actually linked in the article when they talked about consumer testimonials, they actually linked to the CASAD testimonial page. So we're becoming a good resource for that too. And we hope more media uses us for that sort of thing. So that was pretty awesome, because I was reading the article and all of a sudden I saw testimonials was hyperlinked and I was like, I wonder where that goes to. And I clicked it and I'm like, yes. So that was great. Spending that time putting together these resources, and more people we have, get your story on there if you haven't gotten it on there yet.
Yeah, mine's buried in there somewhere. It's buried in there somewhere.
In the banner down there. Right there.
Yeah, it's somewhere down
the link.
Yeah, absolutely. If you haven't yet submitted your testimony, please do. We have like 13,000 and we need millions. So get them in. Share your story. Like I know this. I know people are gonna fling mud at me for this one, but there's an old saying, right? Like the plural of anecdote is data. Like at the bare minimum, there has to be something here. And when you have tens of thousands, if not,
Alex doesn't like that one.
Saying, "Hey, I know Alex doesn't like." That's why I was like, I know I'm gonna get some mud.
I'm not gonna throw mud or shade or anything like that. I just will. I think it's worth kind of tempering that a little bit and saying, look, like when somebody's looking for data, there are specific circumstances under which that data is collected, which makes it valid for whichever purpose. That's kind of my general.
So they say.
I take it with a grain of salt, though. To me, it's just kind of like there has to be something here. Like this is worth investigating. There is something here. If there are this many people, anecdotally claiming something, and it's not something that you would just like, oh, that's nothing. Like it's worth looking at.
And to your point, we've talked about, like, is there any research potential with all of this and so on? And I think just casually, I know that, there internally, we've done some searches for specific keywords, key phrases and stuff like that. And one of the most, to me, the heartwarming thing, or I think one of the most significant things about this collection, or perhaps any collection of testimonials from people who vape, people who switch to smoke-free products, is a recurring theme throughout these testimonials is that people are getting engaged in this issue because they want to make sure other people have the same opportunity they had. They get involved because they want to help. And to me, I mean, I don't know that you can put any kind of scientific weight on that, but it's a truth. It's real. And I think that's kind of one of the things that you can tease out in something like this is what are people voluntarily talking about when they give their testimonials. So yes, to some extent, I think this does have value maybe just a little bit, but it is value from a research perspective. And those are just one of those things. And to put an even finer point on it, things like that are absolutely counter to the narrative that is being pushed by folks who want to see this industry gone. And so that's another reason why continuing to collect these testimonials is very important, and why everybody's stories matter.
Absolutely.
Well, not only that, I mean, they use things like the FDA reporting thing, where they report a bunch of this happened to me. I mean, they use that for
comment period for products and things.
Yeah. Well, no, the adverse event reporting.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, and all of a sudden it's like, well, that seems to indicate something. People might be having seizures from vaping 10 years ago when they had their seizure, but they just started vaping. I mean, you see that, so they use that. That's what I mean by that. It's data. It's data as in meaning it's maybe we need a better word than data, but I mean it's.
Yeah, to Alex's point, it's not
evidence,
clinical study
evidence
data. Like, it's not a controlled thing. It's just people's words on a page. It's not even as controlled as necessarily like a well-written survey, to the extent, you know what I mean? That there are at least certain things you're after.
Are no different than what they like to use the FDA adverse events report for. Those are all just a bunch of stories, but they're used. You know what I mean?
There is a difference. There is a difference in some of the items that end up on the adverse events reporting tool, in that they are being accompanied by a doctor, or it's a doctor that is making the report. So there's a case study that goes along with that. It's something that's verifiable, not for all of them, but just to sort of highlight or offer that up as a difference. We are sort of taking it on faith that people are being honest when they're talking about their experience with switching or whatever medical issues that they experienced beforehand. I don't doubt that everybody that's submitted, we get a few kind of weirdos every now and then, but for the by and large, every single testimonial on here is someone telling their truth. And so that's, but
I mean, I remember going through some when they first opened up that adverse event thing to vaping, going through and reading some of the stories some of them were so weird. I had a puff off a vape and my toes turned purple. I mean, they were just like, some of them were, you're like, how did you even, where are you,
there are things,
those had not gone through a doctor,
I guess things isn't the right word here. There are human beings that exist on the internet, and we refer to them as trolls, and they exist everywhere, including in the adverse.
We did that. Remember? Yeah. I don't know. Oh God, that was years ago. I want to say, was that 2010 or 2011? I don't know. A bunch of people went, I didn't do it myself, but a bunch of people went on there and reported their adverse effects were my lungs cleared up. They were like all the positive things, it was, they just like, don't go do that. Do not go do that, because
don't do that. I and just again to make that a little bit stronger. The adverse events reporting tool is a legitimate, that is for FDA to actually assess issues and take action if needed. And so I had a conversation with somebody who used to work at FDA, and I had pitched the idea that maybe we should use that adverse events reporting tool to talk about things like the negative impact of anti-vaping campaigns that are misleading millions of adults. But his response was like, no, you're really just going to irritate people at FDA and hijack a legitimate reporting tool that people can use to report legitimate injuries. And so that's, I never went any further than that. And so I like you said, I wouldn't encourage people to abuse that.
And people pointed out too that the anti-vaping people will just point out that there were this number of reports. Right. So now you just added to their number on the adverse report. So don't go in there and put a positive thing, because that's the answer just going to say, oh, look there's yet another adverse report, just like they did with poison. The poison centers, they like to say, oh, there's all these calls, all these poisonings, because of these calls to the poison center. But a call, it could just be, my kid touched a bottle. Is that bad? I mean, that's a call, but they like to count that as, all these poison center calls, and it just imply that it was an actual poisoning. So yeah, don't go putting your stuff on the adverse. I'm just saying that's what they troll is what I was talking about because of Logan, but it did not help.
No. Anyways, all right, let's get off the testimony thing, and let's get into are you guys ready to do some take three? Are you guys ready for a take three? All right, let's do the take threes. All right, who's up first this week, and what do we got going on?
Well, I'm going to go first because we had kind of a nice segue with the Utah, the nicotine thing, but then we kind of veered off. And
I tried to reel us back.
Which is my own fault. I'm spitting at the screen. Oh my gosh. Which is my own fault. But my take this week, I need to put the. How do you do this? I don't think I shared my screen.
No, that's my screen.
Hold on. Every week.
This is a sneak peek at what Alex is going to talk about.
It's actually at the end. That's a.
I always forget. See, I was afraid to do that earlier because I wasn't sure if it would just pop up in the middle of whatever it was we were doing. I wanted to talk some more, and Alex kind of talked about it too, about the nicotine caps, because I got into a really interesting conversation with somebody on Twitter about that, because, and I don't think this is, what am I looking for? I am looking for, because Clive, actually, do I have the right screen up? Can you see Clive's tweet?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. I get so confused between which window I'm on. But he was talking about in the UK how they do have a nicotine cap of 20 milligrams per milliliter. I believe it started in 2016. And a few people from the US started piping it up about, how they shouldn't have that. And I've had this argument lots of times. And I'm trying to see if I can find, but he was talking about, this is what they're saying that, let me see if I can find it here. No, I can't find it. Oh, that figures. Well, essentially that there's no basis for the limit, and somebody piped in, and I'm not trying to pick on him. I just wanted to, because he makes some good point, and a lot of people feel the same way. But he was saying, let me scroll back up here, and he said, the thing is the 50 milligram Juul is what kids like for the buzz, so they can get no cap at all. I'm afraid would get more kids in the UK vaping. That would not be good for us. Long-term vapors are quite happy with the cap where it is, though I agree it could be a little higher. And the problem I have with this is that it's just in this attitude of it works for me. And one of the points that I made with that was, okay, well, what if somebody who is perfectly happy with tobacco flavored e-liquid said, well, tobacco flavor worked for me, so I'm okay with banning all the other flavors. I mean, there'd be an uproar because everybody loves their flavors. So it's that same logic. You can't sit there and argue that yours is okay, just get rid of everybody else's. And that was one of the points that I made when I was see if I can pull it back up here. But I just said, how would they feel about that? And go back to here again. And, he was trying to make arguments that, okay, not knocking Juul as a device, just saying they only started screaming kids vaping in the US when the high nic salts and Juul appeared in the market. And that's not true. I mean, like I say right here, I've been doing this since 2009. When Blue was out and Steven Dorff was the influencer, they're like, oh, they have these influencers who kids like, and they're doing all these cotton candy, all this kind of stuff. They were already on that road before Juul hit the market. So this whole argument that, it's all Juul's fault. Did Juul screw up a lot? Yes. But this whole argument that none of this would be happening without Juul and its flavors, or Juul and its high nicotine, is baloney. It's just, you don't know, you don't understand the history, because I've lived through it. Some of us have lived through it. We were there when people in Congress and in New York and in Florida, Deborah Wassinger, whatever her name, Wasserman,
Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
She's in
Florida.
New York? Florida. Yeah, she's the Florida one. She was screaming bloody murder about all this stuff, So, I mean, this was in 2010, 2011, 4 or 5 years before Juul even hit the market. And then he shared this article, and Robert, again, I'm not picking on you. It's just that this is a very common sort of idea of how things happen, especially folks across the pond, because they weren't here through all this too, and they only really know what happened with them. And talking about how Juul hooked kids, they ignited a public health crisis. And, I just said this is just a typical article. I mean, they're talking about how Juul dominates the market. Well, yeah, C-stores, completely ignores the open system vaping stuff. And you can't deny it was Juul who introduced nicotine salts to vaping. Yeah, so, I mean, it just doesn't, it has nothing to do with anything, because we all do our own level. And this whole idea that kids are vaping for a buzz just seems to ignore the fact that there's a lot of things out there you can get a buzz from that work a lot better and give a lot better buzz. Nicotine doesn't give that good of a buzz. You get a little ooh, and you're probably going to get a little nauseous on top of it. So it's not really a fun buzz to get, a nicotine buzz. And it's like the same thing with the argument about flavors. Kids vape for the flavors. Really? They vape because it tastes like Skittles? Why not just buy Skittles? It's a heck of a lot cheaper and a lot easier to get, and you can get them anywhere. I mean, it's just this whole idea they vape for the flavors. All of the surveys showed curiosity. And what was the biggest point of where they started hearing about this stuff? Because in 2015, Juul hit the market. I'm not arguing for Juul. I'm just arguing against this whole idea of falling for this stuff and falling into, it's all this person, it's all this fault. Because as soon as you start, blaming things, you're basically confirming, all this stuff is true. Yeah, their kids vape for flavors. It was, this other, it's all these disposables now, and it's all the people who did cotton candy and gummy bear. That was their fault. Oh yeah, kids vape for the nicotine. That's all Juul's fault. No, that none of that is true. And as soon as you say, and here's whose fault it is, you're basically confirming that this is a true story when it's not. It's just not a true story. So the nicotine caps, the thing that really bothers me is that for one thing, people are okay with, one person's experience is a like I say here, one person's experience is a basis for abandoning other people. If we go say, okay, well, 20 milligrams was enough for me, so we should just do that because I could quit with 20 milligrams or whatnot. Like I say here, if we go there, if we say, we're just going to arbitrarily decide how much is enough because so many people were able to do it. And I said, if we go there, then there's also an argument for banning all vaping because many more millions of people before vaping ever existed were able to quit cold turkey or with NRT. So then you could say, well, we may as well just ban. I mean, everybody's heard someone who formerly smoked and quit cold turkey or whatever say, well, why do you need to vape? I quit cold turkey. You should be able to do it too. And that just grates with most people. Just how can you say that? Well, you're essentially saying that by saying, well, I quit with 20 milligram or 3 milligram or whatever, so that should be good enough. And there's no scientific basis for that cutoff. There's just nothing. And that was the other thing that concerns me, because here I say, I wonder if those okay with nic caps would be just okay if other vapors who like tobacco flavor said, go ahead and ban all the flavors. I was able to quit with tobacco flavor. And I did say right here, I said, what's particularly scary to me is how many people are perfectly willing to allow their governments to pass laws that aren't evidence-based simply because it could be worse. It's not how government's supposed to work. Letting it happen only guarantees the worst will come. And that's what we've seen over and over again. In Minnesota, oh yeah, it's okay, it's just a tax. I'd rather have a tax than them banning flavors. Well, then they started coming after flavors, and then they started giving even more taxes. And then they have tobacco 21 and all that other kind of stuff. You can't sit there and think that this is not going to get worse. Stop giving, I don't need to share my screen anymore. Stop giving them that power. They don't need to have that power to just arbitrarily say, oh yeah, this is why I'm going, 20 is enough. Where do they get that number from? I don't remember seeing any studies that said 20 milligrams is enough. It's just some arbitrary number that they just pulled out, and it makes no sense. So don't support this just because you didn't need, don't support these nicotine caps, A, because you didn't need something that high. And don't support these nicotine caps thinking, B, it's going to avoid something worse, because it's not. And that was something else I said in that thread, is that a lot of this comes from people not understanding who they are up against. And it's like, goes back to the toad or the frog in the water, or whatever it was. We don't like calling it slippery slope. What are we going to call it? I forget what it was, Alex.
Boiling a frog.
You like the boiling frog. Okay, you like that analogy. Yeah. So you can't. That's what happens, and we see it over and over again. You cannot trust that they are going to. You're not making a concession. You're just handing them something. You're giving them their next building block to the wall that they're going to block you in with. You're just handing them another brick, is what you're doing. We saw with the indoor smoking bans. We've talked about this on past shows. Nicotine caps is just another example of that, because now they're saying, okay, high nicotine is bad. Does anybody bother to ask why? Why is high nicotine bad? There's no explanation for that. A pack of cigarettes has 200 milligrams to 240 milligrams, I think, of nicotine in a pack of cigarettes. A Juul pod has about 42 milligrams at its highest, at the 5%. So, because it's not a full milliliter. So how is this high nicotine so horrible? And if a kid is just going to sit there and vape the whole thing to get a nicotine buzz, they're probably just going to puke, like if they sat and smoked a whole bunch of cigarettes. I mean,
yeah,
you have to look at that.
I will jump in a little bit here, and I think one of the concerns about really any nicotine content, it doesn't matter that it's 50 milligrams or 20 milligrams or 18. It really doesn't matter. But the concern is that because vapor products can be used discreetly by young people, and we've heard reports of this, and kids are talking about this. This is not made up. I think we do have to acknowledge, yes, young people are using these products. The problem is that when, if it was just cigarettes, which, just to make it perfectly clear, we don't live in that world anymore. But if it was just cigarettes, you have to step away, you have to hide, you have to go across the street, you have to leave school in order to smoke a cigarette. You have to take all these extra measures to try to get the smell off of you, all of these things. It's a real pain in the neck, and you can only do it so frequently. With vapor products and other smoke-free products, the concern is that habituation can happen faster because they can use it more often. And it doesn't really matter, I don't believe, what the nicotine strength is. It's that if you can develop that habit discreetly in a short period of time, that's what then leads to habitual use, chronic use, however you want to describe it. I don't want to throw addiction in there. Maybe we should when we're talking about young people, but that's the concern.
Would be a decent word to use there. There's potential for dependency.
So I think, and I think that to some extent we kind of have to agree with that. If we are, our take on this, my take on this was, I didn't start off, not right out of the gate smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. It was, a pack of cigarette, or it was a cigarette after school. It was a cigarette or two after school. And as I gained more autonomy, I was able to smoke more frequently. And that's what sort of my addiction to cigarettes developed over the course of years. But now, like I said, because of the discrete nature of these products, that habituation, that dependency can develop much faster. And so I don't want to dismiss those concerns, because it is, this is relevant, and it is legitimate. But again, banning this, there's a world that we used to live in. We don't live in that world anymore. And so kids are going to find a way to get these products. And I don't think the solution is lowering nicotine content or scaring the willies out of kids about these products. It's about educating them. And so, the more that kids understand about how their bodies are reacting to the world around them, and maybe, it's certainly notes about things you should avoid. Don't stick your finger in a light socket. These are very practical tips and good knowledge to pass on to young people so they can make better decisions. That's not the whole story, but nothing that I've just said should go to support a cap on nicotine for everyone. And I don't know how you split it.
I see what you're saying, but then you have to go back to the point of nicotine outside of cigarettes isn't shown to be all that addictive. And so not only that, but even with your example of how you went with cigarettes and you had to build that up and stuff, you kept going back for a reason. That you weren't immediately addicted, and neither will you be immediately addicted at a 50 milligram. If the kid gets too much nicotine for their body, it's going to make them feel sick. So they're going to keep to a limit of that's just the way nicotine works. You don't build that same tolerance as you do with some other things. So these arguments just seem a little off base, only because there's a reason these kids are choosing to do the nicotine.
Right.
There's a reason that they're going back to this nicotine. And so whether or not it's 20 milligram or 50 milligram, even at 20 milligram, they'll just go through more of it. They'll just go through more pods. We've already shown that they've got disposable income.
we didn't plan this, but you just provided a pretty good segue into my take for this week.
There you go. Go, Alex.
So
I'm good on now too. So
if you're finished, I didn't mean to interrupt. But,
no, I had kind of gotten my rant out, my take out, and then had a little back and forth there, and we're good.
Okay, cool. So it's a perfect opportunity, and we'll take it. So one of the things that made it into our blog this week was this report from Hawaii that girls are leading Hawaii's teen vaping epidemic. Now, note. For a little bit of history here, Hawaii was the first state to adopt Tobacco 21 back in 2016. That was when it was enacted. I think the bill was passed in 2015. And so I didn't get too far into where the rates are in terms of a trend, but I think it actually either sort of stayed the same, or maybe went down a little bit, or went up after Tobacco 21 was enacted, as far as youth use is concerned. And so here they are reporting that according to the Department of Health's 2019 Youth Behavior Risk Survey, 33.9% of female high school students vaped in the past 30 days, compared to 27.4% of males. The statewide statistic reflects the fact that girls are more actively using e-cigarettes than boys across the state. And one of the things that Kristin pointed out, I think in the tweet, and also just in our conversations, was first of all, current use, which is worth reminding people that it means once in the past 30 days. I would not qualify that as more actively using anything. That is once in the past 30 days. And the other thing is that boys are smoking at a much higher rate than girls.
And vaping.
I'm sorry, and vaping?
The daily vaping. Boys daily vaped more. They vaped daily more than the girls did. So the girls were trying it in the past 30 days more, but the boys were still vaping. But then, and they were smoking more than the girls. But all of that together, also, I think I put that comparison in the Skype chat about how compared to everything else, it wasn't all that bad. There's no.
Right.
Go ahead. You go.
Oh, that's Frank. Sorry.
Hi, Frank. So this is a tried and true tactic of folks who are against the tobacco and vaping and everything, is that they will pick the most sort of horrifying sounding number, and that past 30-day use, which they brand as current use, is always high, and always sounds like we're in the midst of an epidemic. Without getting into the necessary balancing statements to that number, we do know that what we would actually call active or habitual or regular use is much lower. And for the most part, the young people who are vaping they used to be smoking. And so indeed, young people are using vapor products as a form of harm reduction. But the point of what I wanted to bring up here and dovetailing off of what Kristin was talking about is that instead of just looking at numbers about prevalence of use, I think it's important to look at what are the underlying factors. What is it that motivates someone to go back to that vapor product or that cigarette or that drug? And some interesting statistics. I mean, I'm not, again, not a researcher, but I am always curious about whether or not these things correlate with other numbers. One of the questions on this survey, which is conducted every 2 years, so we're looking at the 2019 survey, was the question had to do with feeling sad or hopeless every day for 2 or more weeks, which included stopping doing some activities over the past year. Girls answered yes to that. 44.1% of girls who participated in the survey answered yes to that, compared to 25.3% of boys. Overall, it's 34.7%, which is up from 2017 and 2015, which was 29.5%, and still also up from 2013. So the trend is in the wrong direction. You have a lot of young people, 34, 35%, who feel sad or hopeless enough to stop doing things. That to me sounds like that is something that contributes to young people seeking out things that are going to make them feel better. And so the narrative here isn't that, oh, these evil tobacco and nicotine companies have targeted your children with marketing and this and that. While in some instances we know that that happened, the more important thing that I think deserves the most immediate attention is what's going on in here with these kids, what's going on in here with these kids, and how can we help them? How can we support them? What policies, if at all, are appropriate to helping kids feel more empowered, have more hope? Is this an issue of education, as I am fond of saying? So on and so forth. The other number that's really important, I noticed this, I think a while ago, back when I had seen that the Tobacco 21 policy really hadn't done much in Hawaii, was how many young people live in a home with someone who smokes. And those numbers have gone in the wrong direction for kids who are qualified as current smokers. In 2013, among the middle school kids who were surveyed, 59.8% of them current smokers were living in a home with someone who smokes. And this has gone up. There was no dip in 2015. It was 63.7%. And in 2017, it's 68.5% of middle schoolers who fall under that past 30-day use smoking. This is specific to smoking. Lived in a home with someone who smokes. Now, this is that thing. This is one of the things that is really infuriating to me, because this is one of the most significant determinants as whether or not a young person will go on to smoke or use any tobacco product, which is if a parent or both parents or someone that they live with smokes or uses tobacco products. The numbers are actually kind of staggering. If your dad smokes, I think you're something like 88.5 or 89%. You have an 89% chance of going on to smoke as an adult. If your mom smokes, that number goes up to like 92. Of course, sex and gender roles and everything is sort of changing now. So I'm curious to see how that is changing as well. But essentially, it comes down to parents, loved ones, guardians, someone living in your home that you're close to, not strangers, not some random person on TV or in the movies that was smoking. It's people in your family who you consider to be your family, have the most influence on the decisions you make growing up. And so this comes back around, again, when they throw out all of these numbers, I think to some extent we can call it misdirection. I mean, these are people who put themselves out there as experts, as very credible researchers and scientists and advocates and all of the things. And if they are glossing over this very obvious indicator as to whether or not a young person is going to go on and smoke, I can't think of any other word than intentionally misdirecting people. That was a few words, but so there are much more significant underlying issues that go into why a young person will choose to use nicotine or any other drug. And we are just not having that conversation right now. This article is one of the worst articles I've read this week. And it is essentially a collection of the standard talking points about how, marketing, this and that. Oh, the epidemic is horrible. I've said it many times. I don't like to be dismissive of parents' concerns. I don't like to be dismissive of school officials and teachers and doctors and nurses and everybody's concerns who are dealing with young people who are struggling with this issue. But this article isn't doing you any favors. I think the real conversation has to be about the underlying things that lead someone to choose to use a particular product, a drug, et cetera. And I think, I really wish I were smarter and better credentialed to sit here and go through all of these numbers and actually make this case. But I don't think it takes a college degree to note that we are not talking about the most important things here, which is the underlying motivating factors for why young people choose to use these products. And that's my take on it.
I agree.
Yeah.
You go ahead, Logan.
Hot damn. Yeah, that's a great take, man. We never seem to approach things from like addressing the underlying issue. We just want to address the behavior that people are doing and not asking why, and particularly young people who are struggling right now. I mean, this is common among just, any kind of drug use, particularly with teens, is we gloss over the why and we just go straight to, this behavior is bad, whatever they're doing to cope with or escape from. Like, we just need to eliminate the thing they're using and that'll solve all the problems. And it doesn't. It just leads to, as a teenager, you're like, all right, well, you got rid of that thing that I was using. What else am I going to do now to address this, deal with this? And whether that's in a healthy way or potentially really unhealthy way. So,
I mean, another thing of this is like, I went through that being, I got in trouble for experimenting with drugs when I was, 13. And it's kind of like, I kind of understand, right? Like, if you take away access, then that's sort of, I think, going to shock a certain number of people into changing their behavior. But what about all the kids that, like you said, find something different to do, something just as or more risky than what they were doing before? Do we now write them off? Like, are they the bad kids? It was the good kids that came to Jesus and decided that they were going to, straighten up and fly right? Are they the ones that go on to get all the accolades and acknowledgement? Do we just, are the other kids just disposable? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kids who don't try drugs don't get addicted. So you see where I'm going there? If they don't try the drugs, they don't get addicted. They're only addressing kids, they're getting addicted and they're doing these, there's the drugs. They never say, well, why did they try the drugs? Why did they want these drugs? And kids don't, and like we were talking before the show, kids don't get addicted from the first time they try it. Danielle had me watch all these shows about on Netflix, and we were talking again before the show about the opioid issue. What do you want to call it? I hate to use the word epidemic because that's another one like that, but crisis, and how that all started, and blaming the drug companies and everything. And I even said in there, they don't stop and think. It's like, yeah, they were complicit and they were feeding this, but why were all these people, and it got even worse during the pandemic, and these people were seeking out the drugs. And it said, and one of the stats that they put up on the screen was 10 point some odd million people had misused opioids in that last decade, or it might have been 20 years, I'm not sure. And 1.6 million, I think it said, were now addicted to the opioids. So that's around a 16% rate. See what I'm saying? So that means a whole lot of people had tried and misused these drugs, but didn't become addicted. They may not have gone back to it. They may not have found any kind of relief from it. It didn't do anything for them. There was something that makes people go back to it. I know there are some drugs out there that can hook you pretty darn quick, but
I thought you were going to say like in one hit, and I was going to very quickly refute that statement.
Quickly,
sure.
no, because I know
quickly,
there's
yes,
one. Yeah, no, they can. There are some that are more. They go to your brain faster or whatever, but nothing's going to addict you from the first time you do it. There's something that is in that person that makes them go, "That did something for me," and that was something that they're not addressing with the opioid thing. They're not addressing with teens who are trying vaping. They're not addressing any of that. Like you're saying, that why are these kids choosing to do that? Something like 86% of the population has tried smoking. Why are they not all addicted?
Right.
Why didn't they all get addicted? There's something that makes you go back. And that's what we have to think about. And this whole thing with, girls, I mean, it's hard to be a teen. Like, I've said it before, my daughter cut, would I rather have her vaping something or cutting herself? Would I rather have her be suicidal or even smoking? I mean, I think, you got to kind of weigh those things out, and they're not looking at that. And like you said, they pick the worst number and say, what did they say? Well, we're at a connected life. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay if it's booze, though. As long as it's booze, it can be booze. That's the only thing that you're allowed to do that with, but not too much. And then you're right. They pulled that one number, that 33. They found the highest number they could. Girls in the past 30 days had taken at least one puff. Oh my God, what does the article say? They're driving the vaping epidemic in Hawaii or something to that effect. I forget.
You mean the headline?
Yeah, the headline.
Girls are leading Hawaii's teen vaping epidemic.
Like it's a race.
No, just that number means anything compared to. And I think I went and looked, and it was smoking, the overall smoking rate, but for both sexes combined with, I think, was 8.1%, I believe, and daily vaping for girls was 6.2 or 6 point something, and daily vaping for boys was 8 point something. So I mean, which number are you going to look at as the worst thing? But one thing I just really wanted I got sidetracked by the drug thing. Tobacco 21, I've been making that argument for I don't know how long, that Hawaii passed that sucker back in 2016, and every year since there's been an article saying that they had the highest vaping and smoking rates. I mean, 2017, 2018, 2020, every year it's gone up. And nobody looks at this and goes, oh yeah, maybe that didn't help anything. It's like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like with anything, with all of this, with, the blaming of Purdue and dealing with opioids and, Juul being the scapegoat here and in the world of high nicotine closed systems and the epidemics and things like this, is it's just always easier to have a tangible enemy than actually address systemic problems. Mm-hmm. We don't want to tackle those actual problems, dealing with real, like Alex is talking about, our youth and mental health issues. And I'm going to talk a little bit about homelessness soon. And those are the issues that we're not actually addressing. And we like to have a tangible enemy, whether it's a drug or whether it's a company or whatever it may be, instead of actually addressing these problems. Yeah. It's an excellent take.
And that's another perfect example of what I was saying before is stop validating these arguments. Stop agreeing with them, because you're just supporting every next step that the people who want to ban vaping and nicotine and everything, you're just supporting them. It's important for you to read these articles with a critical eye. Like I think his name was Robert, in that Twitter thread, he just shared an article that spewed all this baloney about vaping epidemics and stuff, not knowing the truth behind how they twist numbers, like Alex just showed, by using that highest number and the one that sounds the scariest and ignoring everything else there. And that's what they're doing. And so then you're seeing things and you're going like, well, yeah, we can go ahead and, do this or do that. We'll give that up, because then maybe it won't be as bad down the road. And it's only going to get worse. They're just going to use that. They're just using that to build upon. Like I've said in the past, if you concede that you shouldn't vape where you don't smoke, you are now admitting that vaping is as bad as smoking. They will use that for the next thing that they want to ban. Stop
conceding, I think is what she said there. Yeah.
Sorry, I got a little box there.
All right. Well, excellent take, Alex. Great discussion, and I agree with you. I agree with both of you. All right, here's my take for the week, you guys. I'm going to try to keep this one pretty short and sweet, but this is a really cool thing. I wanted to kind of end the take 3 this week on some brighter news or some potentially really cool research. Homeless people are to be given free e-cigarette starter packs as part of a trial designed to help them quit. This is in the UK. The study will be conducted in 32 centers for the homeless across 5 regions in the UK: Scotland, Wales. I have some Welsh ancestry, actually, which is pretty cool. So I'm excited here. London and southeast and east of England. Yeah, I think this is awesome. Full $1.7 million research trial to include 480 participants, 240 each group, and 15 from each center. This is kind of like a follow-up on a smaller study that they had done previously, and so they're kind of expanding on that, and I think this is really cool. There's some awesome potential here just for harm reduction in general, for what people experiencing homelessness may go through, and I just think this is really cool. I think this is really cool, and I'm really excited about this research, and I'm excited to see how it turns out and how many people they help quit smoking along the way. Experiencing homelessness obviously is different for everybody, right? Like there are people who deal with just sleeping on the street. There are people who couch surf. There's a lot of kind of varying degrees of experiencing homelessness. And with that comes an array of different challenges and health risks, environmental risks, financial struggles, things along the way, eating, clean water, all of these things. But there's a high percentage of people who experience homelessness who also smoke. And that's one additional risk that they're taking with their health. And if there's potential there to start there, help people quit smoking, there's potential there to do more. And I think that's a really cool thing. But in here, this is the first study of its kind in the world to look at trialing this method. I think this is awesome. And I wanted to kind of piggyback off of this research and pose the idea of what that would look like here. Do you think we're going to do that here? I would hope so at some point. I think this would be fantastic research to do here. How many Americans are homeless? No one knows. This is an opinion piece from this year from the New York Times. And there's a few key points I wanted to pull out of this article. Again, we don't really know. It's estimated at 568,000 Americans in January of 2019, which is like a snapshot head count of our homeless population. But a really interesting point here, even with that number, that estimate, that same in 2017, the government put the homeless population at 550,996. But that same year, school districts across the country, using a broader definition, again, kind of talking about those degrees of homelessness, reported 1.53 million students So there's a good guess here that snapshot of 550,000 Americans experiencing homelessness in even 2017, or estimated now at 568 or whatever, is a pretty low ball. It's probably much higher than that. With that, this is a study conducted in 2019 that talks about up to 80% of the adult homeless population that uses tobacco and smokes. I forgot where I was going to go with this one. Oh, probably just literally that number, 80% here. That's a lot of people that we could help really quickly if we could implement something where we can give e-cigarettes to homeless people who are smoking to help them quit, and where that potential can lead to addressing other positive changes in their lives, whether that can lead to programs for housing or whatever the case may be there. I think that idea is really cool, and I would love to see that here, but I'm really excited to see this research when it's all done. I don't really have a take other than I think this is really awesome, and I would love to see this because we have a really big homeless crisis in this country.
I have a question inspired by Breezetone's comment here, and this is something that I've wondered as well. Is he himself was ripped a new one by someone claiming that he supported using homeless people as test subjects when posting support for this particular trial. So I am curious, how does someone thread that needle?
Yeah. I don't know. I think this is one of those cases where you have a disproportionate number of people in this population, in this space, who are experiencing homelessness, who smoke, and there's a lot of potential there to help those people. So, I mean, it's not. I would imagine this isn't like a coercive thing. We're not dragging people who smoke off the street and sticking an e-cigarette in their mouth. This is voluntary. So I would assume, at least, or there's some compensation along the way, whatever it may be.
Yeah,
it's not a coercive thing. It's not a.
I imagine, the challenges are pretty similar, compared to, well, just, I mean, people are people. We're experiencing different things, but what do you need to do to convince anybody to try a safer alternative? And how likely are they to stick with that given their circumstances, life choices, et cetera? I know one of the challenges for people without homes or without houses, unhoused people, I don't know the exact way to say this anymore, was, how are they going to charge their devices? I don't know. I don't know how significant that actually ended up being. But all of these things are challenges. And I think, at least for my perspective on this, you're talking about an at-risk population. You can say the same thing for any at-risk population. How willing are they? Again, this is a matter of choice. How willing are they to adopt safer products? Do these safer products meet their needs? I think these are all very valuable questions, and it doesn't matter whether or not somebody has an address or not. If these are folks who can use the help, then by all means, let's find a way to give it to them.
And it's interesting, like that's one of those few like real positive notes that I've made about disposables. I hate the term disposable. But for people, again, experiencing homelessness, if you don't have a place where you can reliably go plug in your device, and a lot of people use libraries and public spaces and things like that to do those things. But if you don't, there is a product that exists on the market, and in my opinion should exist on the market for a number of reasons, and that may very well be one. Is if you don't have a reliable place to charge it, the least you can do is go buy one and use it, and then when you're done, you just buy another one. I mean, there's a lot of costs there as well. There's a downside to that, definitely, but there is an upside to it as well.
Yeah, but that'll eventually come down too, just from if the market's allowed to flourish, but I think the term you were looking for besides disposable, I think we decided on single use last time.
Oh yeah, single use. Get the if we could get the whole industry to adopt that terminology. There are a lot of problems with disposables and recycling and batteries and safety and things like that.
But that's the case with even the non-disposable ones too. I mean, if you think about it, you hear people talking about finding, what they're doing with empty liquid bottles, are they throwing them in the trash? How are they rinsing them out and putting nicotine down into the ecosystem? I mean, you could find problems wherever you look, but isn't another issue with I mean, I was going to say with one of the reasons I think they could probably do the study in the UK a little easier, as far as maybe what popped into my head when you were starting, Alex, was the ethics thing of, can they just do, it's like a study, along the lines, again, what Breeze Tones was saying. And I think it helps that in the UK, it's vaping seen as a health improvement. So they're not giving them something bad. Here, it's almost like, we're giving them something untested and bad. It's got nicotine, it's a bad thing. But over there, it's like, this is a good thing. This is a better thing. Nobody's questioning that, which makes it a lot easier to do this kind of study. But I was going to ask, Logan, is drug use, you kind of have this perception that drug use is very pervasive amongst people who are homeless as well. So, I mean, additional,
it's disproportionately higher.
Alcoholism,
that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, they're not only fighting the smoking, there's all that, I mean,
right. And that's where I'm talking, like, there's a lot of potential for harm reduction here. There's a lot of potential for positive change in people's lives. The one thing that I always question when it comes to studies like this or whatever is that's 1.7 million pounds. Could that money have just potentially gone to bettering the lives of that population in other ways and in maybe bigger ways, more potential ways? I don't know. That's just a question I always have when I see a whole lot of money go to a study and I'm like, what else could we have done with all this money? Are there other potential things that we could have done here that would have been even more beneficial to people experiencing homelessness? But regardless, I think there's a lot of potential to come out of something like this, and I think it's worth seeing how people experiencing homelessness prioritize things. Is smoking something they're interested in giving up right now? Is that at the top of their priority list? Or
kind of talked about that.
There's a lot of things to consider. Important. But regardless, I think if we can, help people, find positive changes in their lives when they're dealing with things like this, I think that's a good thing ultimately.
Agreed.
Yes. It's agreed. It's kind of like what we talked about a couple. What we talked about that was a good one too. What we talked about a couple weeks ago about, is it important for them to quit?
Yeah. I mean, right now, if you're worried about where you're going to get your next meal, where you're going to sleep tonight, all these things, like, is quitting smoking like right at the top of your list? Maybe not. Maybe it is because it's a cost thing and you don't have a lot of money right now, but quitting is a difficult thing. So if this is a means to help somebody quit and now can save money that they can use for those bigger priority things, how much potential does that have for helping, this population? So I just think there's a lot of potential here. I think it's a pretty cool thing. And I would love to see something like that here. I would love to see how we can help people here too as well, or just globally, really, how can we help people just in general? But yeah.
But sometimes just a little thing, just a little thing of being able to overcome. Like, I mean, when I switched and I could suddenly breathe better and stuff, that kind of did make me want to improve other parts of my life too. It did make me want to lose weight and start getting more, moving and getting more exercise and things like that. So sometimes just it can take a little thing to get people kind of, hey, this is one little win I got. Now maybe they'll lead me to get some others. So good take. That's a good take. I'm going to put this up here too because.
A lot.
Right?
$130 million. A lot. Man.
Skip says how many
tiny homes for that. I think there's a guy that made the local news who's building like $2,000 tiny homes.
Yeah, I'm just going to read
I mean, I don't know the numbers or what it would really actually take, but I have a feeling that Bloomberg could just end homelessness in this country probably like tomorrow, like just with the signing of a check or whatever. But yeah, absolutely.
And for those listening on the podcast, Skip Murray had said how many homeless people would have been helped with Bloomberg's anti-vaping funding.
Yeah, a lot. Bloomberg, we need to get on anti or pro homes campaign or something. Find something else more positive or positive at all to donate to. $160 million to donate to, or fund, I guess. Anyways, that's my take for the week. All right, moving briskly, swiftly along. I don't know what word to use here. I try to use some of Alex's fancy words and I always fail. But moving right along, we are, I guess, ready. Are you ready to do a little deep dive?
Yeah.
All right, I'm ready. You guys ready?
Ready.
Okay, we're ready. Deep diving it here this week at CASA. What is our deep dive this week?
So I think we've typed out different titles, but the one that I have on the show notes is, does industry have a role in promoting tobacco harm reduction? And for maybe to kind of set the table a little bit, I pulled up this tweet from Alex Norsha, and this is referencing a bit of a controversy, scandal, maybe, I don't know. SRNT, the Society for Research on Nicotine and Tobacco, made an announcement, I think it was this week or last week. My weeks are running together because of the holiday. But they announced that they would be barring tobacco company employees from attending their conferences. And a lot of people immediately reacted to this announcement because the definition of tobacco company employee wasn't necessarily clear to people. And so the initial reaction was there were accusations of censorship. A lot of people who simply serve as consultants to tobacco companies felt that maybe they would be excluded. Researchers who have accepted payment from tobacco companies to do science, all of anything, the immediate reaction is anything that tobacco money has touched is going to be banned from this previously open and curious type of environment. I have never attended SRNT, not a scientist, not a researcher, and not made of money, so we can't pay to go to these events, and certainly would not, especially not now, expect SRNT to grant us access for free. But I think Alex Norsha responsibly followed up on this controversy and posted a letter that was sent out, I believe, to SRNT members, clarifying that this was strictly limited to employees of tobacco companies, not consultants, not researchers, not kind of third-party folks that don't receive a paycheck from a tobacco company. So I'm not going to go through the entire thread here, but if you do follow Alex Norsha, he did thread out this letter, and I recommend, if you're interested in this topic, please read this for SRNT's kind of clarifying statement. Ultimately, however, I don't think that this really satisfies a lot of people. There are folks who work for, believe it or not, there are folks who work for tobacco companies who are genuinely interested in advancing the smoke-free portfolios of these companies. They have joined these organizations because they come from a background of science or public health themselves. And although they are employed by these companies, their curiosity and passion about this issue has not been necessarily affected in negative direction. They are still open to the research and the data, and they want to know how they can best serve improving public health. And that is, in fact, having spoken to several of these people, why they went to work for tobacco companies in the first place. It wasn't to get rich, it was to change the course of human history and stop all the needless early death and disease. And so it really is, I think ultimately it is folly that SRNT has made this decision. But I mean, again, never attended a conference, so I can't imagine my word carries much weight with them. But I think it sort of services this narrative that tobacco companies are evil and that they can, manipulate your brain without you even knowing it. And we were talking before the show. I don't know. I really don't know what kind of benefit SRNT or anybody in the tobacco activism space, anti-tobacco activism space, thinks that this is. I don't know why they continue to support this idea that they are so weak that they just can't be in the same room as people who work for tobacco companies. If that is your view, that you are so easily manipulated by people who draw a paycheck from RJ Reynolds or Altria or any of the other companies, I don't know that we can trust you to do science. I think that's where I land on that. So, toughen up, Buttercup. The other adults in the room can maintain their own opinions without being manipulated by somebody suggesting something counter to the narrative that you've been fed or that you are actively working to promote. Anyway, all of that having been said, it should be no surprise to anyone that for decades now, there has been a concerted effort to keep tobacco industry funded research out of journals. It is all about, we don't want this science, credible or not, to influence people's views. And of course, the implication there is that all tobacco company science is fraudulent. This is not true, but I'll get back to that. So I figured, continuing with the background here, we've sort of set the stage for what's happened recently. But one of the things that we've been, I think, noting regularly now, and since this comment keeps coming up about tobacco industry funded science, is that this science is absolutely necessary in order to submit a pre-market tobacco application. I know that you were looking for this the other day, Kristin. Did you kind of come up with sort of a brief overview of like what is expected in a PMTA? I
did, but did I share that link? It was essentially that. No, and I wish you would. Oh, you caught me off guard.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, it was essentially that they had to prove that not only is their product not as bad as smoking, but that it's not going to, that it benefits public health, and nobody's going to start using it that shouldn't start using it. I mean, just, you have to, somehow they have to prove a negative, which is like impossible to do. I don't know how they're doing it, but I don't think it's, the way it's worded, that's the way it is. But I don't think that's the way the FDA is going to do it. I think it's just, they're just going to look to see that it's not worse than smoking or as bad as smoking. But they have to prove they have to essentially prove it's safer than smoking. They don't get to get the modified risk designation by doing that, but that's essentially what they have to do, is prove it's safer, that it's not adding any risk.
Right. So. Appropriate for the protection of public health is what is that's the standard, which I think several people have tried to define, but it's not a very, it's not, because there is involves proving a negative, which is very difficult or near impossible to do. And so you don't do that by not submitting science. And so one of the reasons why we bring up the PMTA is that there seems to be kind of this misconception out there that FDA is responsible for doing all of this research. Well, FDA only gets, I think, $700 million a year from tobacco companies. Tobacco companies pay the user fees, which is, I think it's $7. I get mixed up because there was that proposal to raise that limit up $100 million. Right. Yeah. But around $700 million a year for the Center for Tobacco Products. That money is used for various things, of course, staff and launching these ridiculous campaigns. But what all of those staff are charged with doing is reviewing the science. So when you're a tobacco company or a vapor company or whatever, you have to go and pay to do the science related to the products, specifically to the products that you are submitting an application for. The FDA doesn't do that for you. There is no council of super holy people out there who do that for you. Your money doesn't get washed in the blood of Jesus before it goes to fund these studies. Tobacco companies directly pay for the science that is required for their pre-market applications. The only money involved, and I don't even know if this is accurate, in terms of what a company would pay to the FDA, would be something along the lines of filing fees. But no one is paying FDA to do the science. FDA is there to review the science, ask questions about the science. They're actively working to poke holes in these studies. They write back to manufacturers. They send deficiency letters, and they say, we have questions about this study that you supplied. Do you have additional studies that can back up this conclusion, or something along those lines? It is a conversation between the regulator and the companies. And so that being the case, I'm skipping ahead here. But that being the case, ultimately the conclusion here is that the research being produced by tobacco companies, research being paid for by tobacco companies, is actually some of the highest quality tobacco science out there. Except you and I might not, the average person, the average nicotine consumer out there might not be aware of that, for one thing, because most of this stuff ends up behind a paywall. And another thing is a lot of journals have a policy barring, they will not accept research conducted by tobacco companies. And this is one of those things that we get into the whole conflict of interest thing, which is one of the things I do want to promote before I forget about it, is another event that happened this week. This is the Tobacco Online Policy Seminar. I'm expanding the wrong thing here. TOPS.
There's so many great tobacco, in the realm of tobacco, shorthand things tech TOPS.
Yeah. So anyway, this is something Mike Pesco, I know is deeply involved in this. People may remember him from some of his economist research on vaping and tobacco use, University of Georgia. So this is a sort of a weekly type of, it's on Zoom, it's free. Really the only barrier here is that it happens in the middle of the day during the week. But if you do have time, and you can tune in noon Eastern, it's about an hour long. They are very informative, and they are taking on some issues here. We've got some upcoming events, July 22nd, looking at vaping restrictions in public spaces. But of course, this week, and why I bring this up, is that we had a conversation between Neil Benowitz, UCSF, Joanna Cohen, I believe she is an assistant editor on the journal Tobacco Control. I think I might be messing that up, but and Michael Cummings, and they were all discussing whether or not industry research is acceptable, or what are the talking about conflicts of interest, and whether or not these studies should be allowed to be published in these journals. And we are in the yes camp, and I will echo something that Michael Cummings said during this presentation, which was, back in the day, the tobacco companies used their own science to obfuscate the risks and confuse people, and continue to deny the risks, and all of that, and it was bad. But ultimately, well, maybe not ultimately, but eventually what happened was it wasn't so much the studies that people were reading that was a detriment to public health decisions. It was the science that they didn't see. And these were studies that perhaps, maybe someone knows more affirmatively than I do, these were studies that did show that there was a sort of unreasonable amount of risk, there was actually harm. And it's putting those blinders on that's really putting everyone at risk here. And so I know I didn't really go too deep into the background just yet. So I'll sort of backtrack before I go on to the next thing, because I do think we owe it to everybody to propose some solutions here. But a really excellent book that I've shared on the podcast before is this book, Ashes to Ashes. And you can see this is a relatively well-thumbed copy that I've been using for reference. But back in the day, in the 50s, I think 50s into the 60s, there was an organization known as the Tobacco Industry Research Committee. And this was basically used to produce, it was sort of a science and public relations type of effort. And it was used to assuage people's fears about smoking, because by the time that the 50s rolled around, there actually was a lot of science showing that smoking was responsible for the skyrocketing rates of lung cancer and other diseases. And of course, by 1964, the US Surgeon General came out 2 years after Public Health England, or was it the Royal College of Physicians, and released the report on smoking and health, and declaring that cigarettes were this enormous health hazard. So that Tobacco Industry Research Committee was that is one example. I think there's other institutions that tobacco companies had sort of founded for this purpose of producing science to assuage people's fears, while not, of course, reporting the other side, which was all the harm. Things like the fact that filters on cigarettes didn't actually make them less harmful, lowering tar and nicotine, people compensated by inhaling more and inhaling more deeply. All of these things, this was science that didn't really come out. So the really important kind of point here, at least on the science aspect of all of this, is that we want and we need to see everything. Jumping back to PMTAs, if you want to read a PMTA submitted by a tobacco company, you're going to have to go through the Freedom of Information Act. And when you get a copy, finally, after 3, 4, 6 months of back and forth requesting this document, what you're going to get is going to be heavily redacted. This is that tightrope that FDA has to walk. There are there's trade secrets in there, there's proprietary information, there's all kinds of things that the companies are entitled to keep close to the vest, secret. And so a lot of that stuff we're not going to see. The product specific stuff we are just not going to see. So my pie in the sky solution to offer here is that as a consumer, I want to see it all. I want all of the tobacco industry research, open access, available publicly. That is sort of consistent with all of the, the tobacco documents that are housed on the legacy website, or, whatever it is now. It is about continuing this transparency, and so that we actually do have all the information in front of us. And there should be no difference between what's produced by a tobacco company and what's produced by, for example, UCSF. Science is science, and I do have this expectation of the people who are making science and making policy, that they are themselves smart enough, intelligent enough, diligent enough to review this and give their opinion based on the merits of the science, not who paid for it. So that is just sort of one part of this deep dive, which is what role do tobacco companies have in promoting tobacco harm reduction. I've ended up talking the entire time here, but in order to, I think, maybe send it around to everyone else, first of all, we have, of course, the question of tobacco industry science. The second thing to bring up, and something that we've, I think, responded to members with their concerns in the past, is just from a purely logistical standpoint, tobacco companies are in the best position to distribute these products quickly and to the people who need to see them the most. And that means putting these closed system, single use or rechargeable products on the shelves next to cigarettes in the same place, in convenience stores and gas stations and grocery stores and so on. And so
that's natural real estate. I mean, they have to pay to have their stuff there. Most vape companies don't have the kind of financial backing to be able to buy that real estate. That's,
Yeah. So the short answer there is both from a producing science standpoint and from a distribution and marketing standpoint, tobacco companies, not only can they play a role, they should play a role. So with that, I think those were kind of the things that I researched or looked at before coming to the conversation. Curious what your thoughts are and other points you might add to this.
I think it's a point that is echoed often, like harm reduction, meeting people where they're at. Like you said, those products are right there next to the pack of cigarettes that you're heading to the gas station or the convenience store or whatever to go buy. And the more that they're visible by people who smoke and they are attainable, they're there's a higher chance that people are going to make that switch or at least try these products. And when it comes to people making the switch to safer products, like that's the goal. Like that should be the goal is not, you know, whether tobacco companies should, like, I just think they absolutely should. Like you said, like it's right there. If you have the money, the ability, the distribution to get safer products into the hands of people who smoke, why are we against that? Why are we fighting that? Like, yeah, I agree. Yeah,
we've made the point before. That's like saying that car manufacturers shouldn't be allowed to make more fuel efficient cars that are better for the environment. I mean,
and I could be wrong. During the hearings, you know, master settlement agreement and all this, when tobacco companies sat in front of Congress, were they not literally told to make safer products? Like, was that not part of that conversation? Because I'm pretty sure it was. Like, you guys need to make safer products. Like that was part of that conversation.
Yeah, I don't know how you can avoid that. I mean, the flashy bumper sticker point that gets thrown around is, you know, cigarettes are the only consumer product that kill 50% of the people who use them when it's used as directed. So, yeah, whatever. But that's the bumper sticker. So, you know, and so, yeah, I think I haven't read the transcripts nor committed it to memory. And I have the same image I think everybody else does, you know, burned in their head of all the tobacco company executives, quote unquote, lying about what they think the addictive nature of nicotine is. So, yeah, I think, and of course, you know, when we had this conversation about in regards to Connecticut a few weeks ago, you know, with Matt Myers coming out and sort of dismissing MRTP, the modified risk, as a loophole. No, it's not a loophole. You were in the room when the language was written.
You helped draft this language.
Right.
Matt Myers is one of the people that helped draft the Tobacco Control Act in whatever capacity, whether he was actually putting pen to paper or just in the room negotiating for what was going into it. And he is actually, you know, I think he has at least expressed some pride in the fact that there may in the future be products that would fall under modified risk or lower risk, especially compared to smoking.
That we have coffee. Isn't that his quote? That if we had, wasn't he being quoted that if it didn't have any harm and was popular, then we'd have coffee or something.
Yeah.
You know, that was
Yeah.
That was him. Now, what popped into are you guys okay for me to? What popped into my head on this one was, and I was kind of between this one for the story or the one on the why can I not find? Oh, I gotta pull that up. Well, I have to. I have to pull this. Hold on, I got to pull this screen out into a separate window before to let me share it. There we go. Okay. So that's kind of between this one and the Nick caps, because this kind of tied into what we were talking about this guy who was talking about. Was this the one that? Am I in the right one? The one where he was saying that. Yeah,
I'm looking at the Juul lawsuit. Is that what you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, but he's talking about stop. But what he was talking about in this article was actually this article about Juul taking academic corruption to a new level because they bought all this space in a scholarly journal, and how they're going to try to use that. You know, buying this journal, this edition of the journal, that's going to, you know, they're hoping that this is going to sway the FDA. And clearly he has no clue how any of this works, or he's purposely misleading people, because I want to pull up those little old ladies. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works, because they don't. I mean, they don't. That buying this journal is not going to give it. I mean, this is all the science they probably have to, they're probably using and putting together for, oh my gosh, sorry, all this stuff is popping open, for PMT, for pre-market approval. They're probably you're probably putting a lot of that out there that they don't have to put out there to the public. They paid an extra $6,500 just to make it public, so all of us and all these other vape companies can look at the studies that they've put out. They didn't have to do that. So, it was just ridiculous that this guy's trying to claim this is Juul, trying to somehow convince the FDA by buying this that they're the good guys and stuff. And it's like, that's not how any of this works. I don't know where he's getting this from, that he thinks that this is, oh my Lord.
Well, I want transparency from the tobacco industry until we get transparency from the tobacco industry. Right. And then we're like, no, we don't want.
Well, just to maybe a little bit, first of all, I don't think he's like coming up with this on his own. I think this is just part and parcel with the overall narrative of you just can't trust tobacco or nicotine companies. But the other thing is, as much as I appreciate Juul making all of this open access, and paying, I think the sum total was $51,000 to buy this issue of the Journal of Health Behavior, the Journal of American Health, something like that. I have not gone through every single study. I imagine they are all positive, and certainly the science. I expect that the science is very good. I would much rather see an article, someone replicating the studies or trying to replicate the studies. That's a lot more useful than just someone's opinion about whether or not Juul is doing some PR campaign. I think you can probably refer to this as PR, but it's useful for people who are curious about the products and want to know what the benefits are. But certainly, I do not expect Juul to have published any studies that showed negative consequences about these products, and that's part of the problem. And so I appreciate the fact that this is all open access. I appreciate that this is a move towards transparency. But what about the studies that we haven't seen, that we're not going to see? And there is no mechanism to make those studies public unless you can get it published in something like the Journal of Tobacco Control, or unless these other journals accept these studies. I imagine even if it was something that showed something negative with these products, that according to their policy, it would be a rejected outright. And that's not serving the public interest. That's not serving the scientific discourse. But I do pretty much agree that this person's take on this whole thing is absurd. And the more science that we have, the better. And I applaud Juul for doing this. Although I think there is certainly justification, and this isn't specific to Juul. This is any company, any industry. I would expect them to not put bright, shiny lights around research showing potential harms associated with the product.
Sure. Right.
Yeah. And that's what they all do. But this paragraph, but just saying, oh, this is like showing this, it's corrupt. There's corruption. It's like, speaking of bright, shining lights, you can't miss the disclosures. You click the link. He says right there, click the link and you can see who all these people were and how much they spent and where they worked for. Where's the corruption? But the part of this too, it says, to my eye, there looks to be little difference between the corruption of for-profit scientific journals that degrade the quality of available research and the corruption of this particular scenario, where an entire issue of a decades-old scholarly journal goes directly into the hands of a private company. Here's the part that will use it to persuade a federal regulator about the efficacy of its product. Okay, and poor FDA, they're so innocent, they might not be aware of the degree of the pay-to-play relationship in this special, because FDA is going to look to this for, he's clueless about how the processes of pre-marketing, but it says FDA officials might not be aware of the degree of the pay-to-play relationship in this Juul special issue and how that might compromise the science.
FDA is brand new to how all this works.
Yeah, FDA is so innocent. This whole thing just made me crazy. I mean, I couldn't believe that. It was.
Fortunately, I don't think a whole lot of people read that blog. So
no, that's not the blog. That's the American
from the New York
Prospect
Times
one.
instead.
That's the other one. That's not that tech thing blog. That's American Prospect. That's a whole different thing. But anyhow.
Never heard of it.
Yeah. I'm just trying to catch up on this here. Yeah,
I think ultimately, like, yes, we need all the science that we can get. Like, why blocking science for any reason just doesn't do us any good. Whether it's good or it's bad, the research has positives or negatives, whatever it may be. That's the whole point of science to begin with, to test your hypothesis. That's the whole point. We need all the science. We need it available. FDA is going to do their due diligence, and they're not going to be persuaded by Juul publishing some things in a public access journal. And these products, absolutely, when we talk about whether or not incumbent tobacco companies should be playing a role in tobacco harm reduction, when it comes to access and distribution of these products to people who smoke across the country, particularly people in rural areas who are not going to have access to your local mom and pop vape shop to go buy open systems and things like this, where the only thing available to these people are gas stations and convenience stores where they currently buy their cigarettes. To get that space, like Alex said, that takes money. Like Kristin said, that's real estate. These are the companies that can afford to do that and absolutely should do that. I think that's my kind of final take on all of that is yes. Yeah. Yes, we should absolutely have their science. We need that. We need transparency as much as possible. And we need more science, good quality science. Like Alex said, tobacco company science is high quality. This isn't 1962, 1958 anymore where we're hiding things and it's whatever. It's good science. We need that. And people need access. As many people as possible need access to these products.
I will add one kind of wrinkle, and we've talked about this before in relation to cannabis. And I think we can't get through this conversation without acknowledging, of course, people's skepticism of tobacco companies, rightfully earned skepticism, rightfully earned mistrust. And there is a very real, legitimate, verifiable concern. It's not just a concern, it's a reality that only the largest manufacturers will have their products on the market. And the thought is, of course, as we talk about smoking and other drugs as a social justice issue, is it right for tobacco companies to have kind of the first crack at the market, which is what's going to happen? FDA has already publicly stated that the top 4 or 5 companies by market share are going to have their applications reviewed first. And so there is certainly, undeniably, a benefit of getting to the market first. And so it's making it even harder for the smaller independent companies that they have just always been a vapor company. They've always been a smoke-free nicotine product organization. It is more challenging for them to sustain their business. For a lot of the people that are working at those companies, these are people who used to smoke, people who switched to vaping and went to work for a vapor company because they wanted to do some good in the world. And now all of those people who are sort of, in a way, do their own form of, I don't want to say compensation or reparations, but for all of the money that we've all poured into tobacco companies buying cigarettes over the years and destroying our health, destroying communities and families and so on, doesn't it make sense for the consumers who were most affected by smoking and all of the misinformation around smoking that happened over the course of generations, doesn't it make sense for those people to have the first or early crack at making back some of those financial losses, some of those personal losses, as opposed to giving it to the larger companies? So I say that to temper the sort of across the board yes when we talk about whether or not tobacco companies have a role in THR. Yes, I believe that. Yes, I think that is the way to get this done very quickly. But I think it has to be balanced with making sure the marketplace is open and accessible to the smaller manufacturers who are facing an incredible financial hurdle. I mean, despite the fact that 6.3 million products there are PMTAs for 6.3 million products right now. Despite that, how many of those companies are going to be able to get to the next phase? And if they do get pre-market authorization, how many of them are going to be able to follow through with post-market surveillance? How many of them are going to be able to re-up that authorization in 3 or 5 years, however many? Again, PMTA is not set in stone. FDA can revoke that. Same with MRTP. So there are tremendous financial hurdles in front of the independent open system side of the market. And I don't think that we can just give that blanket endorsement to tobacco companies leading the charge in the THR revolution without acknowledging all of the small and medium manufacturers and retailers out there who actually made the soil fertile for these products to be popularized by incumbent tobacco companies.
Right.
Yeah, because it wasn't, it was like mid 2010s when we started seeing certain, I guess, well, no, it was earlier than that. We started seeing incumbent tobacco companies really move into the space.
Kind of.
No, later.
And their products weren't that great. Yeah.
I think. 2011,
I don't know when like Mark 10 and whenever like Logic and all of these other like previously sort of independent companies were bought out by tobacco companies.
Right. Later,
that was their movement.
We constantly were arguing. These aren't tobacco companies. In the early days, 2009, 2010, I want to say it's still even in 2011, we were still saying, this is not big tobacco. Big tobacco doesn't make these products, and then all of a sudden, I forget if it was Views or Logic or somebody came out. We're like, oh, damn, no, we can't make that argument anymore.
Yeah.
But that's them. There's also that argument, well, how can they sit there and sell cigarettes and then turn around and sell vapor products? Well, how can a car company sell gas guzzler and turn around and sell an electric car? We have to give them the option. They're given the opportunity to, and I truly believe a lot of them, they want to segue. It's never been a good business model to kill off your customers. That's not a good business model, And so I do believe that they would like to see, they want to keep selling their tobacco products, their safer tobacco products and their tobacco sourced products, nicotine based. And I think by not killing off, they can change their whole image. They would like to be seen like the alcohol or the cannabis industry, where they're not killing off all their customers or just another recreational product like those things. And I think that'd be a smart thing to do, So we have to give them that opportunity, I think, and get out of this black and white mentality of good guy, white hat, bad guy, black hat. Tobacco companies are all the black hat. Well, we've seen plenty of black hats on the side that's supposed to be the white hats these days, don't we? You can't keep that black and white mentality. And they've got the wherewithal. It's that hat selling. I'm sorry, one more thing. Selling those cigarettes is funding all the other stuff. They're not going to be able to phase it out and develop all these other products and the marketing and all that kind of stuff just based, they can't just stop selling those things. Plus, there's a heck of a lot of people who smoke out there would be pretty pissed if they did, There's always
someone who's going to pick up that slack too. If one company was like, oh, we're just done.
Took away my Marlboro Lights. What the hell? They're not going to all go out of business stop selling cigarettes at the same time. And that's a big problem, but.
A couple of things. One, I was just reminded, and I'm sorry that I don't have an image to share or a link to share at the moment, but there was an announcement earlier this week from Philip Morris International, and it sounds like they are committing to actually phase out their combusted products in relatively short order, I think by 2035. 2025, and then there was another goal. I think there was like 2 goals. So 2025, I think it's I want to say like selling 1 million units or a much larger portion of their sales will come from smoke-free products. And then by 2035, I think they were looking to phase it out entirely. And of course, Philip Morris is a publicly traded company, so they're accountable to their shareholders. And so they are going to have to make that case that they are going to continue bringing shareholder value as they go through this process. It's not impossible. They can do it, but it's something that companies have to come to this. They have to structure this, and they have to plan for this on their own. This isn't something that we can legislate, because this is the other point I wanted to bring up. Something that you were saying, Kristin, why don't we ban cigarettes, or why do these companies continue to sell these products? This becomes an issue of safe supply. If we have cigarettes manufactured on an underground market, well, these are manufacturing facilities in countries that may not have the same kind of regulatory oversight that we have in the United States. There are safety issues associated with that. These could be fly-by-night operations. I don't know how many cigarettes you can actually produce out of the back of a van, but it's not impossible. And so there are questions about the quality of products that are produced on an underground market. And even though both of these products will have a really good chance of ending your life early and making your final years somewhat uncomfortable, understating it there.
Yeah, by a lot.
I know. I was just struggling for a word.
Miserable, horrible,
absolutely painful, and suffering. Suffering was what I was trying to work into the sentence, but it just didn't work. But even though both of these products will do that, it's the underground products that present more risk. And so why force consumers to buy those products when
most
we know
more immediate risk?
There are responses. There are companies out there operating with good manufacturing practices in place. I know cigarettes aren't health food, but you can actually make a more dangerous cigarette. Yeah. And if you push it all on the underground market, that's what you're going to get. So that's one of the reasons why it is actually in our best interest for Philip Morris, Altria, and so on to continue manufacturing these products, because I don't want the fly-by-night operations or the underground folks to come in and take that market share. I would rather know that FDA inspectors, USDA, or whoever is going to inspect these manufacturing facilities has done that and made sure there aren't things like rat poison or metal shards or whatever ending up in cigarettes.
And it'll phase out. I mean, it's like that conversation, was it 2 weeks ago about Ruth Malone, and her saying, well, we need to why not phase out the most dangerous product? Why don't we phase this out? And we're like, we are phasing it out. It's being phased out pretty quickly because consumers are choosing it, unless you keep taking it away or keep telling them that this product they're choosing over cigarettes aren't any better. I
mean, do you know anybody that still has a rotary phone on their wall?
Exactly. Well, yeah, I do, unfortunately.
Okay.
I know somebody. I do know somebody. But yeah, exactly. Consumer demand, and it's going to get phased out, and and the tobacco companies are already seeing that, and that's why they're seeing people just like organic food and health food and low carb food and low fat food and all that kind of stuff. The companies follow the consumer demand, and consumers were starting to demand these things more and more until all these public health groups came out and said, don't do that. You don't want that, and essentially just keep smoking or just quit. You can't have anything. It's like it's so like that. It's like telling somebody don't diet, don't drink Diet Coke, just stay fat, or whatever. It's like, if that's what's helped somebody keep from drinking sugary soda, and that's their vice or whatever you want to call it, it makes no sense. It makes me crazy that they they do that.
Well, anyway, I hope we've had a informative conversation about what role tobacco companies play, and not just the science, but in promoting tobacco harm reduction. I hope people are walking away from this at least with better questions. If we didn't kind of approach everything, I know we call this segment the deep dive, but for the most part, it's because we spend a lot of time on a single topic, not because we are giving the comprehensive overview of something. Although I aspire to do that someday, and I don't want to make this boring like some lecture where you're reading bullet points and copying down long links like people put in slides for some reason. So
the full link right in the slide.
And that's why we try to put your comments up on the screen and stuff too, because we want you to feel part of the conversation. So we'd like to have everybody feel free to comment, and we'll try to put it up there. Mike does have a good question here. It says, I don't get the denial on vaping as a cessation tool. I mean, it is the only reason I was able to quit. What would it take for vaping to be considered a cessation tool?
It would have to go through the PMA, which is the pre-market application, which is for drugs and devices. So it's based on our regulations and laws. You and I can talk to one another about how these products helped us quit smoking, but as soon as a manufacturer or retailer starts making those claims, they are crossing into making a therapeutic claim, which is where FDA steps in and says, cool, show us all the science, go through the application process, and we'll tell you whether or not you can market this as smoking cessation therapy. And that is exactly what led to the Smoking Everywhere Enjoy versus FDA case back in 2009, 2010.
You can find more information about that on our historical timeline on our website.
Excellent plug. Yes. That is one of the other most useful things about our website is that historical timeline. So yeah, there's a lot of history there. Definitely dig into that, and that'll provide you some more detail.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially why we became tobacco, because all these products would be immediately illegal to sell and banned if they were declared unapproved drugs. And you can only call yourself a cessation product or therapy is if you've been approved by the FDA as a cessation therapy drug. As soon as you say therapy, now you're making drug claims. Now you're making therapeutic claims. Now you're making a claim that you're curing or treating something. And that's why the industry said, oh, we're not, we're an alternative. We're not trying to cure smoking. We're giving them something else as a different source, a different social source. And that's because if we were trying to say we're curing, even though we are, I mean, because you're not smoking, but it also, in their mind, a cessation drug, you're supposed to wean off of that eventually and be nicotine free. It's treating nicotine addiction, so that's why that's not where I think absolutely we will eventually have this weird time that we're going to have vaping products that are social nicotine, recreational nicotine, and we're going to have vaping products that are cessation tools, because somebody will eventually, I think, submit to be an actual therapy. I can see it happening.
For kind of a less loaded or less hot button kind of example of what we've been describing here, General Mills, the makers of Cheerios, actually ran into this. If you remember, Cheerios used to say things in their marketing statements about how you can lower your cholesterol. I think they heart healthy, which I think the heart healthy designation is something that I don't know if the American Heart Association gives that out.
Just give us enough money and we'll give you a designation.
But whatever it was, I don't even know. I assume that there was some research that went along with this, showing that if you ate a bowl of Cheerios for 30 days, you could lower your cholesterol by X number of points.
No research.
Okay, so no research, whatever.
No, there's no fact.
Even if there was research, that gave FDA that it is their mandate to step in and say, if you're going to make that therapeutic claim, you're going to have to get Cheerios through the drug and device pathway.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wasn't there a honey or I can't remember if it was honey or apple cider vinegar or some weird thing. Prunes, I think prunes ran into cranberry juice. Cranberry juice ran into the same thing because people tend to use it for urinary tract infections. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if they had something on their website or something, and they went after them and said, you have to prove that. And I think there was something with honey. But they've gone after a few different food companies for making therapeutic claims that it prevented or treated or whatever. And yeah, so that's one of the reasons why CASA exists, was because the companies couldn't make those claims, but consumers can. So that's why we make those claims all the time. It helps you quit. Absolutely. And yes, if you're not smoking anymore, you quit. Doesn't matter if you're still using nicotine. That's why we're here. That was one of the whole reasons that CASA exists. Did that answer your question, Mike? I don't know.
I wonder how many companies in the CBD space have ran into this.
What's that?
So I wonder how many companies in the CBD space have ran into this with FDA and things like that. It's not a question we need to answer today. It's just a vocal curiosity, I guess, because that's one of the first things that comes to my mind is there's a lot of therapeutic claims, true, untrue, real, not real, about CBD. And where like FDA steps into that regarding
I think it falls under supplements.
I have seen a change. There was a Vermont pet store company that was saying things about, give your dog these CBD treats to calm them down. I think some in the industry have gotten nasty grams about even claims about, using this for your pets. I don't know that there's a lot of science behind giving these treats to your dogs. I don't know. But yeah, I think there was kind of, I don't know if it was just saber rattling or an actual crackdown. It was like 2 or 3 years ago. And so I think at least the folks in the CBD industry maybe are a little bit more conscious of it. I just don't know what kind of
Yeah, it was just a curiosity
that
comes to mind when we start making, therapeutic claims. Is just first thing I went to was CBD, because there's just a lot of them. And I see them still today regularly. And I'm just curious, I guess. Just curious. Okay. Anyways,
I have to say something. Wait, Matthew Welsh says, this is back where we're talking about the cereal and the heart healthy thing. And he says, yeah, because we can dump milk on anything and make it healthy. Greetings from 1970. Ironically, it's the exact opposite. The milk was the unhealthiest part of it, unless it was like 1% and there was no fat. It was the fiber and the whole grains and the lack of fat. Fiber and lack of fat. That's because that's what it all started. They're still on the whole thing, fat's bad for you. And even though, go ask your great grandma how she used to lose weight and stuff, and she'd say, cut out the carbs. Anyhow. Okay. Well, Mike,
before we veer into keto chat.
Yeah.
I had to say that. But it's just but that's a perfect example of how research gets so skewed, and somebody just throws out, posits this and then they know how to pay the right people. Same thing with, again, those documentaries on the opioid thing, and how having the right friend in Congress can make a huge thing, a huge change, and how public health policy, not just things like smoking and drinking and drugs and food, those are all things that are very imprecise sciences. Diet, same thing with smoking. A lot of times it's that reporting, it's that self-reported linear point of time. I can't think of what the term is when they're just snapshot in time here, and then what are you doing here? Let's not know anything that's going on in between those two moments. Here you were eating, here you were smoking 6 packs a day, and here you had quit smoking, or whatever, and they don't know what was going on in between that time period, because you're doing, help me out with this term. It's the kind of study, observational, is that the word I'm looking for?
Cross-sectional.
Yeah, cross-sectional. Thank you. Oh, that was making me crazy. Yeah, cross-sectional
versus longitudinal.
Yeah, you're not following you all the way through and seeing. And so anything to do with the human body is so imprecise when it comes to things where the big factor, the unknown is people. People lie, people cheat, people feel guilty and they don't want to say, they leave things out, So yeah, it's a very, I got into the whole keto diet thing and saw so many parallels to vaping and stuff. So it's the same science and stuff like that, agendas. So yeah, it's fascinating to read those studies and see how they skew things, like you were talking about the percentages with the Hawaiian girls driving the epidemic.
The word that shall not be spoken.
The word that shall not. We should ban that word.
All right. Well, I guess on that note, on the note of banning words, we're not going to ban words. At least I hope not. But I hope everybody who stuck around, or to anybody who's watching the replay, thank you for joining us today. I think we're pretty much done on our deep dive. I think we are. So thank you to everybody for tuning in today. Really quick, podcast listeners. So I was bad last week. I didn't put out a legislative rundown. I just posted the whole thing, or the week before. I'm going to get it up. I just forgot to. I posted the longhand one and was like, That's it, I guess. Okay, I'm going to get that one up. And this week as well, there'll be a shorthand legislative rundown version for you to tune into, as well as this whole episode. So whether you're watching one or the other and you're curious about listening to the rest or just getting the shorthand version, it's available to everybody. And again, thank you to everybody who tuned in today. If you have not yet already, head over to CASA.org, sign up, become a member, join. It is absolutely free. And if you also have not yet submitted your testimonies, please do share your story. It is really important. I know Alex hates it, but the plural of anecdote is data. I'm just going to say it again just because it sounds great. And they mean something. They are valid. Your stories are valid and they are important to share. So please do that. Any final thoughts for everybody out there today? Kristin, any final thoughts?
Not that I can think of. We've talked so much today. Hey, all of us are on Twitter. So if you're, it's great if you're also following CASA at CASA Media. I am at Noel_Marsh. Alex is
at hello_Alex.
And Logan is
at Logan_exhales. I think we all have an underscore. Look at that.
Yes.
I also have an underscore. So yeah, there you go. So follow all of us on Twitter. That'd be great. We often have really interesting side conversations and things like that don't make it to the official CASA account. So I'd love to have you guys follow us, and Danielle's on there. She's that's a tricky one, but I follow her so you can look at who
Didn't she change it? Didn't she change it?
I think she did change it.
I think it's Danielle THR or something like that.
That's right.
I think that's what it is. I could be really wrong. It used to be Rubber Ducky, You're the One, spelled all sorts of different ways, with numbers and stuff.
She's
but I
on
believe
there.
she changed it.
Jim McDonald, he's on there.
Jim is at Y Cherry Y.
Y Cherry Y. Julie is just Julie.
I think, is she just Julie IA, or is that her?
Is it IA?
Is that her e-cigarette
right
form?
Now. I'll tell you what Julie's is. Carry on though, if you have any others.
Julie.
Who am I missing?
Matt. What's Matt's?
Matt Cully.
Is
it
Matt?
just Matt Cully?
Oh,
SMM.
SMM. Is he still at Suck My Mod? And it's just
no. I believe he's changed.
I think he
all
changed
of that.
his too. Yeah.
I believe he's changed all of that. So let's see.
Yeah, he is at Matt from SMM. That's what I have him for.
Cool.
But
Julie is just Julie_MO.
Oh, yeah, she changed it.
Yeah.
Oh, she did change. Oh, yeah, well, she keeps moving.
She's not in Iowa anymore.
So yeah, so my whole thing is follow us on Twitter if you can. I'm also on Facebook if you don't mind seeing like pictures of my dog and.
Just so you know, if you follow me on Twitter,
food that I created for dinner.
Yeah.
But so hope everybody has a good week.
All right. Any final thoughts for everybody out there today, Alex?
Yeah, well, every week we try to come up with an interesting topic for the deep dive. Like I said, with our discussion today, I hope I covered at least a lot of the bases and a lot of questions that people might have. But like the regulators, we ask you to send messages to. We can't think of all the questions. So if there is something specific you'd like us to maybe look a little deeper into and discuss on the podcast, please, I don't check the comments, but I'll leave that to Logan and Kristin. Under the video, after it's posted, leave a message in the comments. You can send us a message via Twitter and email. You can send an email to board@CASA with questions or topics you'd like us to maybe pay a bit more attention to. That'll help us out a lot, because at some point, I think we're going to run out of things to talk about.
No. Speak for yourself. I never run out of things to talk about.
It's a fear. I'm afraid of that. I'll bare my soul for the world to hear. I'm afraid that I'm going to run out of things to talk
about.
Some
auntie's going to do something stupid within the couple days before we have the show. We'll always have plenty of stuff.
There's definitely a lot to talk about. As somebody who's been doing either video or podcast kind of in harm reduction and tobacco harm reduction space, you are going to have moments where you're like, I don't know what to talk about this week. What are we going to do? And those are the moments where those comments and those emails and those messages really, really come in handy, because you guys might have a question about something that the three of us and Danielle is kind of in our little podcast media group as well aren't going to come up with or think about or think to come up with, or maybe it's something we haven't talked about in a long time, and maybe there's been some changes. Maybe we've seen some science, some new things that come out, and we can kind of update something on. That's where those messages and things really come in handy, and we can have those discussions here. So it's definitely useful if you guys have stuff. There's no like stupid question or topic either. If you're like, oh, they've talked about this before, or oh, maybe this isn't relevant, just send it anyway. If you have questions, we're happy to address them here on the show. And yes, definitely comments, messages, Twitter, all over the place. Definitely, for sure.
We will eventually get some guests on this show.
We're working on that. We're working. You guys, it's my fault. It's supposed to be my responsibility to get guests on the show, and I just haven't done it yet. We're going to do it soon, though, I promise. We're definitely going to either have somebody else with the three of us, or perhaps we'll just do kind of one-on-one shows with a guest, something like that. Either way, we're going to get that sorted out, and we're definitely going to be bringing some really incredible guests on the show soon. I'm getting there. We'll get there. Anyways, I just hope everybody has a great weekend. I hope everybody out there is staying safe. And I hope that you all join CASA. Do it. Join CASA. It's awesome. It's a great place. Do it. Okay. Anyways, that's where we're going to wrap this week up, everybody. Thank you guys one last time for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay safe. And we will catch you next time. Last spiel. Same place. 4:30 Eastern, 1:30 Pacific. You got to figure it out everywhere else in between. Here, YouTube, Instagram, and on Facebook. That's it. We'll see you next week.